Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, joins us now. Michael, Ambassador, I'd like to get your initial thoughts on what we just heard from the Secretary of State, and also the release of those 2 American hostages by Hamas.
Well, let's start with the Secretary's speech. Good to be with you. Powerful, inspiring, reassuring, and not being persuaded in any way, not being moved by Hamas's subterfuge and attempt to manipulate world opinion, because that ties directly to the hostages. The hostages, Judith and Natalie Raanan, were released. I believe they were released because of a program I was on earlier this morning, about 20 hours ago, with the great reporter Martin Fletcher, who announced that these were his family members. He actually broke down in the middle of the talk. It was very moving. We all got very moved. Hamas realized that they had a great asset on their hands, a lot of publicity, high profile, and that this would generate a calls for the United States to put pressure on Israel not to proceed with its invasion, because it's going to now, the narrative now is going to try to change. Well, Hamas is going to try to change it. It's been saying basically, hey, all that you heard about our beheading and burning and raping and mutilating people, that was all a false narrative. That's what the Hamas spokesman said. It was all the narrative of the fascist Biden. And this is the real feel-good, generous Hamas. And look, we're releasing hostages. And if you want the rest of the hostages to release, you better start putting pressure on Israel not to invade, not to have a ground incursion. The Secretary of State didn't fall for that in any way. And you could see some of the reporters' questions. They were getting there. They were saying, isn't this the time to start putting pressure on Israel not to act? He wasn't going for that. And he actually went further. He actually had an implicit criticism of the New York Times and of much of the Western press, which is taking Hamas on its word, about hospital bombings and other incidents. So, would you take ISIS on its word? Would you quote as truth a statement by the ISIS spokesman? This is something we say here, something I say nightly on the news, and this was coming from the Secretary of State. So that was a very powerful message. He reiterated that he expects Israel to operate militarily according to international law. Of course, we're going to operate in international law. We say our army is the most moral army in the world, showing great restraint even now. So believe it or not, we're up against an enemy that has created some of the greatest atrocities of the century, and the greatest against our people since the Holocaust.
Ambassador, let me. You brought up 2 great points, and I want to just. The first question was about the rules of war directed at Israel, and to your point, the second question was about maybe an olive branch of sorts that Hamas has extended, that where all the hostages could be released if certain things could happen right now. Are you surprised at just how deeply the West and really the massive media has accepted Hamas as a legitimate source or adversary that should be taken seriously in these sort of things, and the calls for ceasefires?
It's outrageous. Again, would you accept the word of an ISIS spokesman, Al-Qaeda spokesman? And the only reason that parts of the international community and parts of the media are making that distinction is because the victims of Hamas are Jews. And if you ask me if there's some element of anti-Semitism in it, there is definitely some element of anti-Semitism. I have no question about it. It's a complete, it's holding Israel and Jews to a completely different moral standard than you hold anywhere else. Proportionally speaking, in 2 days, Israel lost the equivalent of 52,000 Americans. And what would America do if in 2 days, 52 American, God forbid, but 52,000 Americans were killed in a terrorist attack and American hostages were taken prisoner? Would the United States stop? Would America not respond to that type of heinous atrocity? Because hostages have been taken.
Ambassador, before I let you go, this is the beginning of what everyone agrees will be a brutal ground fighting, urban fighting, treacherous fighting, that civilians will be put in harm's way, to your point, to try to sway global opinion. A few days ago, you said it was a golden opportunity to also focus on Hezbollah. So just how wide-ranging should this military operation be, and how long will the political will, even within Israel, hold out as these images happen? I mean, things will happen in the fog of war.
Indeed, and sure they would. And I've fought in Gaza myself before. It's a nightmare. It's a warren of booby traps and mines, and underneath is all the hundreds and hundreds of yards of tunnels and bunkers. So most of the fighting is actually going to go on beneath the ground and not above the ground. And Hamas is trying to use 1 million Palestinians as human shields. It's trying to prevent those Palestinians from leaving the battlefield. So it's immensely complicated and dangerous. You're absolutely right. As for Hezbollah, there's a working assumption here that Hezbollah is liable to enter this fray when Israel is already bogged down and maybe tired from its incursion into Gaza. Hamas represents a threat that's about 15 times that of Hamas. Hezbollah has about 150,000 rockets in its arsenal, very accurate, big rockets. They have a terrorist force that's been killing hundreds of thousands of Syrians for 10 years. Boy, just think what they'll do to us. So the big question is, do we wait for Hezbollah to begin the war, or do we preempt it? And that's a big question. I've suggested in the Israeli press that maybe we should hold off with Hamas, because Hamas is not going anywhere. It's trapped. And we can keep on hitting them. Hezbollah presents a much greater threat. We are at maximum mobilization. 360,000 Israeli soldiers have been called up. We have these 2 American naval groups off the coast of Lebanon providing deterrence. Maybe we should think about the north as well. That's my feeling. Having said all that, Israelis are determined. We have to restore our deterrence power. We have to restore security to 62% of our country, which is the South. If we do not do that, no one's going to live there anymore. No one will invest there. Right. You come as a tourist, you may not go there. And we have to restore our people's faith in our state, which has been very much impaired.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Have a good and quiet day. Thank you.